Here is the paradox that sits at the center of almost every retirement conversation I have ever had, and that almost nobody states plainly enough to be useful. The people who plan most carefully for retirement are often the ones who are most surprised by what it actually costs. Not because their planning was careless, not because the numbers were wrong, but because the thing they planned for and the thing they actually entered were, in a fundamental way, different things. They planned for a financial event. They entered a financial identity. And those are not the same thing, and the distance between them is where the money quietly disappears. My name is William Grant. I have spent 40 years in this work, and the observation I return to more than any other is this: retirement is not a number you reach. It is a relationship you enter. A relationship with time, with structure, with identity, with money. And like every meaningful relationship, it behaves differently from the inside than it appeared from the outside. The person standing at 55 looking toward retirement is looking at a different thing than the person who is 68 and living inside it. And almost everything that costs people money in retirement, the overspending, the underpreparing, the financial decisions made from disorientation rather than clarity, flows from the gap between those two perspectives. I want to give you the thing that closes that gap, not a strategy, not a set of rules, one idea, examined from every angle it deserves until it is clear enough to actually change the way you think. The idea is this: retirement is not the end of financial complexity. It is the beginning of a different, and in many ways more demanding kind of financial complexity. And the people who understand this before they retire are in a categorically different position from the people who discover it after. Consider what happens to financial decision-making during a working life. The structure is, in the deepest sense, imposed. Income arrives on a schedule. Expenditure fits within that schedule, or it doesn't. And the discipline required to keep it within bounds is significant, but not total. The income is coming regardless, and that certainty provides a kind of psychological backstop that operates almost invisibly. When you overspend 1 month, the next paycheck arrives, and the system resets. When a financial mistake is made, the ongoing income provides the raw material from which recovery is built. The margin for error is not infinite, but it is real, and it is renewed regularly. Retirement removes that backstop, and removing it does not just change the mathematics of your financial situation. It changes the psychology of every financial decision you make. Suddenly, every expenditure is drawn from a fixed pool rather than supplemented by an ongoing flow. The relationship between spending today and having tomorrow becomes direct and visible in a way it never was during the working years. This shift is enormous, and it is almost never described clearly enough for people to actually feel its implications before they are living inside it. The financial decisions that people make poorly in retirement are almost never made from ignorance about money in the abstract. They are made from a failure to fully internalize this shift, from continuing to relate to money as though the income backstop were still present when it is not. The purchase that feels manageable because it would have been manageable on a working salary. The home project that seems like a reasonable use of assets because assets always felt like they had a replenishment mechanism behind them. The support extended to family members at a level that made sense when income was arriving monthly, but that draws from the same pool, now funding the next 25 years of living. None of these decisions is irrational on its own terms. Each of them reflects a relationship with money that made sense for decades and that retirement has quietly made obsolete. This is the revelation that nobody puts clearly enough in front of people who are approaching retirement from the other side. It is not that you need more money. It is not that you need to spend less. It is that you need a fundamentally different relationship with every dollar you hold. a relationship built around the permanence of the pool rather than the renewal of the flow. And building that relationship deliberately before you need it, rather than discovering its necessity from the inside of the disorientation it produces, is the most financially valuable work available to anyone over 50. What that relationship looks like in practice is not complicated to describe, though it is genuinely difficult to build against the habits of a working lifetime. It starts with an honest accounting of what retirement actually costs, not in total, not as a single number, but as a phased reality that acknowledges the front-loading of the early years, the relative stabilization of the middle years, and the healthcare-dominated complexity of the later years. Most retirement projections model a simplified version of this reality. The simplified version is useful as a starting point and inadequate as a finished plan, because the reality is not simplified. The first decade of retirement is more expensive than almost any projection assumes, not because of waste, but because of vitality, because the energy and freedom that coincide for the first time in a life produce spending that concentrates in the early years in ways that planning tools built around linear assumptions consistently underestimate. The failure to account for this front-loading is one of the most consistent financial mistakes I have observed in 40 years of this work. It is not dramatic. It does not manifest as a single bad decision that can be identified and corrected. It manifests as a gradual erosion of the buffer that was supposed to last 25 years, an erosion that is not catastrophic in any given year, but that compounds across years until, somewhere in the middle of retirement, the financial picture looks meaningfully different from the one that was projected at the beginning. By then, the options for responding to it have narrowed. The most valuable years for adjustment, the years between 50 and 65, when income is still arriving and the pool is still being filled, have passed. And what could have been a manageable recalibration has become a constraint. Understanding this before it happens, carrying a realistic, phase-specific picture of what retirement will actually cost in each chapter of its duration, is not pessimism. It is the opposite. It is the thing that makes genuine freedom possible inside retirement. Because freedom inside a fixed pool requires knowing the size of the pool and the realistic demands that will be made on it across time. The people I have watched live most freely in retirement are not the people who had the most. They are the people who had the clearest picture. Clarity about the real costs produces the confidence to spend generously on the things that matter and the discipline to spend carefully on the things that do not. The absence of that clarity produces something that looks like caution but functions like anxiety, a permanent low-grade financial unease that prevents both the generosity and the discipline, because neither is possible without knowing what you are working with. There is a second dimension of the retirement reality that nobody describes honestly enough, and it compounds the first in ways that are difficult to separate once you are inside them. Retirement changes not just the mathematics of money, but the psychology of time. During a working life, time is structured externally. The week has a shape that is imposed from outside. Meetings, deadlines, obligations, the rhythms of professional life that organize the days without requiring any conscious effort to construct. This structure is invisible precisely because it is constant. You do not notice it any more than you notice the air. And then retirement removes it, and its absence is immediately, persistently felt in ways that most people did not anticipate. The financial consequence of this loss of structure is real and largely undiscussed. When time is unstructured, spending often becomes a structuring mechanism, not consciously, not as a deliberate choice, but in the way that every human being fills emptiness, with activity, with projects, with decisions that create movement and purpose in days that would otherwise feel formless. The renovation that was not primarily about the house, the purchase that was not primarily about the thing, the trip that was not primarily about the destination. Each of these is a human response to a genuine psychological need, and each of them has a financial cost that is real, regardless of whether its true cause is recognized. The people who navigate this dimension of retirement most successfully are those who enter it with an intentional answer to the question that nobody thinks to ask during the planning years. What am I retiring into? Not what am I retiring from? Most people have a very clear answer to that question. But toward what? What will give the days their shape? What will create the sense of purpose and community and contribution that the working years provided structurally and that retirement removes structurally? Answering this question before retirement begins is not a luxury. It is a financial necessity, because the cost of not answering it is paid in the accumulated expenditure of years spent filling a structural vacuum with spending that was never about the things it appeared to be about. The revelation I want to leave you with is this, stated as plainly as I know how to state it. The financial challenge of retirement is not primarily about having enough. Most people who have planned reasonably have enough, or close enough to enough, that the difference is bridgeable. The financial challenge is about knowing what enough means in the specific, phased, psychologically complex reality of the retirement you are actually going to live, not the simplified abstraction of the retirement you have been planning for. That knowledge does not come from a projection made at 52 and left unexamined until 68. It comes from an ongoing, honest engagement with the real numbers as they evolve, from a willingness to look at what the first 5 years of retirement have actually cost, rather than what they were supposed to cost, and from the discipline to adjust the picture before the gap between the projection and the reality becomes a constraint rather than a correction. You know more than you think you know about what retirement will actually require of you. You have been watching it approach for years. You have a sense, even if it is not yet articulated, of the ways in which the plan you made does not quite capture the life you are moving toward. That sense is not anxiety, it is information. And the question, the only question that matters at this point, is whether you are going to act on that information now, while acting on it still gives you choices, or whether you are going to wait until the retirement you are living makes the gap visible in a way that leaves you with fewer of them. You already know the answer. The real question is when.